Welcome to Michael's Backyard Marina. Today's episode is about the most neglected item on a boat, the trailer. Everybody relies on the trailer to get them to and from the water. That's great. The most neglected thing on the boat trailer is the wheel bearings. The wheel bearings go in the water, out of the water, in the water, out of the water. Nobody ever checks them. People put bearing buddies on them, and then they never even look at them after they put the bearing buddies on, thinking that the bearing buddy is some miracle cure that's going to keep their wheel bearings from burning up. Well, that's not true. This is something you need to check on a regular basis. So what I'm going to show you today, I've currently taken the wheel hubs off. I'll show you how I put them back on. Taking them off is just the opposite of putting them back on. I'm going to show you how to remove the inner races on a bearing and replace the inner races and the bearings themselves, repacking them, and how to properly install them. So let's get started. Okay, what I have here is a couple of hubs and bearings that are off of a boat trailer. I'll show you what the old bearings look like, the condition they were in. You can see that they weren't burned up, but they got a little warm when you drug it down the road at highway speeds. You see all the little pit marks and dark discoloration on the bearings themselves, the rollers themselves. Here's what they're supposed to look like. They're supposed to be new, pretty, and shiny. And they'll stay shiny and new as long as you keep greasing in the bearings and keep the water out. So I'm going to show you how to remove the inner races, which this bearing rides inside of right here. I'm going to show you how to knock those out because with my new bearing set, we've got a brand new set of races that are going to go right in here. We need to drive those in properly. Now, in order to drive the bearings out, you're going to need a punch. Something with a nice sharp edge on it so you can catch the edge of that bearing inside there and drive it out. You're going to reach from this side down to the bottom side. Let's see if I can get it so I can show you where I'm going to be driving on. Might be hard to see. But you see the back side of the race right here. So I'm going to put my punch in there and I'm going to drive down that bearing race. And you got to drive in at a slight angle to get it to move. And these will be pretty tight. Let's go with a bigger punch here. So I felt that give a little bit. You want to work it back and forth. Never just drive on one side. There, I can hear it hit the bench there. Once I'm down to the bench, I can tip it on the side a little bit. A couple more little love taps there. And the bearing will be free. There you go. Same thing to the other side. There's your two races knocked out. Now you want to take and clean up the inside. I had previously cleaned this housings up with a solvent tank. And now I'm just going to wipe out any excess that might have been in there. Now we're going to go get the new bearings and install those. Here again, you want to install them squarely and straight. Tap them in. Make sure you're looking all the way around that they're going in straight. Should be able to knock them in. Light taps like that back and forth. Once you're down flush, this is where that sharp edge here is going to come in handy, because you can lay on top of that edge there and drive it in. Once you get down to the bottom, you'll feel it more. You'll feel a more solid hit. Everything seems to bounce on you now. It doesn't feel like it's giving it all. And you want to make sure those are seated like that, because if they're not seated tightly, once you go running down the road and everything starts bouncing around on you, then the bearings can become loose and the tension won't be proper. So next step is packing the wheel bearings. So right here we have a wheel bearing with no grease in it. We need to pack that thing with grease. so it has a good chance of surviving the rest of its life. The way I pack it is I just take this and just keep working it in to the bearings. If you don't have a bearing packer, you can do it by hand like this, and it does a pretty good job. When you're doing this, you'll start seeing some of the grease mash in between the bearings. As long as you keep mashing like that, you'll see it starting to work up. Like right there, you can see the grease just starting to work up through this area here. And you want to pack these things nice and full of grease. So you sit here and do this for all 4 bearings that go in the thing. I like to, once I get my hands greasy, I just keep going and get them all 4 greased up. It saves on paper towels. Okay, there you have it. You got your wheel bearings all greased up. Now I'll get the hubs and we'll put one of the bearings in and put the seal in. Hold on 1 second. So here's the hub we just knocked the bearing out of. So what we'll do here is we'll take the one bearing and lay it in here. You see the grease kind of mush out when you push it in. I like to go ahead. I got plenty of grease on my fingers here. Maybe not quite enough though. I like to go ahead and fill all the area in behind the seal. Now I am using a marine grease. So the nice thing about marine grease is it's not impacted by water. It doesn't get washed away or diluted by water. It helps maintain its lubricity if it's ever subjected to water. So you give yourself a little bit more of a fighting chance. Okay, now it's time to install the seal. This will be your cup style seal. It's a double lip seal. This will go right in behind that bearing. Now the seals, this was a straight bearing setup with 1 1/4" bearings. Most of them have, you might have a straight inch bearing set, or you might have the back bearing be 1 3/8 and the front bearing be 1 1/16. There's different combos out there. You have to determine what you got. Now what I do is I put that on there like that. I'll lay a block on top, so I can drive a nice, you'll feel it when it stops, and that's where you want to stop at. Now it's driven in flush, it's flat, and running true with the housing. Okay folks, now we're out here ready to install the wheel hub. Obviously you can tell that this trailer's outside. You want to make sure that the seal area back here and the bearing area is wiped down really good and clean. The other thing that's always nice, test fit that nut. Make sure that you're going to spin on freely for you. Kind of hard to get started here. But you want to be able to spin on there freely, make sure there's no hang-ups there for you. Then all that's left is take your bearing hub. I like to put a little bit of grease on this seal area here just to get things started. That way, and you got a little bit on your seal back here so it's not dry. You just got rubber on metal, you want a little bit of lube there. Then I'll take that bad boy and slide it right back on there. That's the locating spot for that. We'll grab our bearing. We'll stick that in the front part here. Push it in until it stops. Now we got a washer. Oops, there goes my cotter pin. We got a washer here. It goes up against the bearing. We got our axle nut. We'll tighten that axle nut down. Now you don't want to tighten it down. You just want to take you want to make sure she's bottomed out. So what I like to do is give that thing, snug it up a little bit like that. It still spins, but it's tight. So right there is where it stops. You want to back it off to the next hole. So you got your cotter pin right here. So you drop your cotter pin right in through the hole there. We'll tap that down in place. Okay, back with the needle nose. We're going to go ahead and tweak these up into place. You want to bend them up far enough that your bearing buddy doesn't hit on them and rub. So as you can see there, we've got the bearings all in place, lubed up. I got my bearing buddy here. I'm getting ready to reinstall. We're gonna put that. You always want to use a rubber hammer, soft face hammer. Pound that in until she's running nice and true and seated in there. The next thing I've done, I've loaded up my grease gun with the same axle grease or marine grease as I pack the bearings in. Now what you want to do is squirt grease in here. These bearing buddies are spring loaded. Once it's full, you'll see the cap there where the zerk is, where the grease gun's hooked onto, will start to move out toward you. Basically what you're doing is you're filling that thing up with grease, but the bearing buddy prevents you from applying too much pressure, so there's room for expansion. So when the grease gets warm and expands, it's got some place to go besides blowing your seal out the back side of your axle hub. So it looks like we're getting there. We got it compressed about halfway. We'll call that good. Then we'll wipe that off, get the excess grease off of that. Now you should be sealed up nice and tight, and should be able to have a lot of miles of trouble-free miles. Now we'll put the little bearing buddy, it's called a bra, on it, I guess. Stick that back on it. Burp the air out of it a little bit. There we go. One wheel hub ready to rock and roll. Okay folks, the last thing we need to do, and this is something I do on every time I touch a wheel hub, I've got some thread lube. It's a heat copper flake, makes screws and things easy to remove. I always like to put a dab of that on all my axles or all my wheel studs. It keeps things from rusting to them, makes them easy to come off when it's time to take them off. Just a little bit of that goes a long ways, just like that. That's the right way to do it. And now we'll sneak the tire back on here. Get lined up here. And we'll throw the lug nuts on. There you go folks. Now what I do, it's most important as well, is once I get this back set on the ground again, I'll put a torque wrench on it and make sure all the lug nuts are torqued to the proper spec. Now if you say you don't have time to do this, all these little steps as far as the grease and the bearing buddies and the little bit of lube on the axle studs, you got to ask yourself, if you don't have time to do it right, how are you going to find time to do it again? That's my tip, and that's how you do your axles on your boat trailers. Happy trailering and even happier boating.